into a bluish dress, and the cowhead girls saw all of the water of the Yamuna river turn into milk, so they began to churn it into butter. In other words, by spreading of Krishna consciousness or the glories of Krishna, everything became white and pure. Jai. Hari Bol.
Could you share that once with me? I was asking him why couldn't eat my notices they saffron. He said because we're preaching. Everything goes white.
Jai. I think I should be wearing yellow.
Yeah, I think so. It's the fish one, right? On the crust is not yellow.
And Venus, purple. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 14, entitled Ideal Family Life. And we're on text 41. Purusheshu api Rajendra. Purusheshu api Rajendra. Supatram Brahmanam Vidu. Supatram Brahmanam Vidu. Tapasa Vidyaya Tushya Tapasa Vidyaya Tushta. Whoop. Tate Vedam Hares Tanum. Tate Vedam Hares Tanum. Purusheshvapapi Rajendra. Supatram Brahmanam Vidu. Tapasa Vijaya Tushta. Tate Vedam Hares Tanu. Purusheshvapi Rajendra. Supatram Brahmanam Vidu. Tapasa Vijaya Tushta. Tate Vedam Hares Tanu. Bolo. Randra. Supatram Brahmanam Vido. Tapasa Vijaya Tushta. Tate Vedam Hares Tanu. Purusheshvapapi Rajendra. Brahmanam Vidu. Vijaya Tushta. Tate Vedam Hares Tanu. Purusheshvapapi Rajendra. Supatram Brahmanam Vidu. Tapasa Vijaya Tushta. Tate Vedam Hares Tanu. Purusheshu, among persons. Api, indeed. Raja Indra, O best of kings. Supatram, the best person. Brahmanam, the qualified Brahmin. Vidu, one should know. Tapasa, due to austerity. Vijaya, education. Tushya, and satisfaction. Tate, he assumes. Vedam, the transcendental knowledge known as Vedas. Veda, sorry. Hare, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tanum, body or representation. Translation. My dear king, of all persons, a qualified Brahmin must be accepted as the best within this material world, because such a Brahmin, by practicing austerity, Vedic studies, and satisfaction, becomes the counterpart body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Responsibly, please. My dear king, of all persons, a qualified Brahmin must be accepted as the best within this material world, because such a Brahmin, by practicing austerities, Vedic studies, and satisfaction, becomes the counterpart body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. From the Vedas, we learn that the Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Person. Every living entity is an individual person, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the Supreme Person. A Brahmin who is well versed in Vedic knowledge and fully conversant with transcendental matters becomes a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore one should worship such a Brahmin or Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is superior to a Brahmin because whereas a Brahmin knows that he is Brahman, not matter, a Vaishnava knows that he is not only Brahman but also an eternal servant of the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, worship of a Vaishnava is superior to worship of the deity in the temple. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, Shakshat Daritwain Samashta Sastra. So there are some that say Sama Sama Sastra. Haribol, wakey wakey. There are some that say Sama Sama Master. So it's Sakshat Daritwain Samashta Sastra. That's what it is. And if you're saying something else, then you're making a fool of yourself. In all the scriptures, the spiritual master who is the best of the Brahmins, the best of the Vaishnavas, is considered to be as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This does not mean, however, that the Vaishnava thinks himself God, for this is blasphemous. Although a Brahmin or a Vaishnava is worshipped as being good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such a devotee always remains a faithful servant of the Lord and never tries to enjoy the prestige that might accrue to him from being the Supreme Lord's representative. Om Agyanatimananda Shagananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmat Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhastam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Swavadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhattarinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikalpa Tarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha, Paditanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So it just reminded me toward the end, Prabhupada makes a little warning. He says, he shouldn't try to enjoy the prestige that might accrue to him from being the Supreme Lord's representative, which is referred to by Raghunath Goswami in Manashiksha as pratishta. And that is where you have prestige. So when you're a new devotee, you struggle to do things nicely, sing properly, know the words properly. But as you get older and you start to know all these things, then what can come in as pratishta? Does anyone know what Raghunath Goswami compares pratishta to? A dog-eating prostitute that dances in the heart. And when that prostitute comes into the heart, she opens the door and allows all the anarthas to come back in. So you may have been working really, really hard for years, and then you become, maybe you even become a guru, or you get prestige, or even a sannyasi, and everyone's bowing down to you. And then pratishta comes in, and then all the anarthas come back. So it's not that at any stage in practicing devotional service that as you become advanced, that means that you can relax now. Everything's going to be okay. It becomes more dangerous because the path becomes thinner until it's like a razor's edge, and then you have to be very careful. So watch out for that one. Once you start getting the hang of it, that's when the pratishta can start coming in. So, does anyone know why? Yeah? False prestige. It's a subtle form of sex life. The gross one is the gross one, and then the subtle one is name, fame, adoration, distinction, and gain. So you think you've got rid of it, and then it comes back in. And when you're a new devotee, there's not that much to be proud of, really, because you're making mistakes all the time, trying to get the hang of stuff. But once you do start to get the hang of things, that's when you can start becoming proud. Because some people are proud anyway, even though they've not got anything to be proud of. Some people are proud of the fact that they're so ignorant. And if a person is complaining all the time, then that's a symptom of somebody in a mode of ignorance. If you analyze a person, how much of the time do they spend complaining? And then if they're a little bit more elevated, then they stop complaining and they stop being the center of attention, or trying to be the center of attention. And then if they can finally manage it one of these days to get to the point where they start to appreciate others and start to see that they're in a very privileged situation to be able to associate with devotees, people that believe that God is a person and are trying to serve him and please him, then you're coming into the mode of goodness. So mode of ignorance, mode of passion, and mode of goodness. And then from the mode of goodness, like Prabhupada is saying here, then you're considered to be the best of all the Brahmins. So interesting, it says it must be a person who's qualified as a Brahmin because he's practicing austerities, Vedic studies, and satisfaction. So how do you practice satisfaction? Anyone like to break that one down? A person practicing satisfaction, what does that entail?
Well, we can find the material satisfaction. We always want that. There can be really satisfaction between one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it could be that also. Yeah, the fact that it's saying practicing satisfaction would imply something else as well. What would it imply if you were practicing satisfaction? What would that imply? Like when if you're practicing to hit the bullseye in archery, what does that imply? That you don't hit it. You're practicing, so that would mean that you are dissatisfied. You're practicing satisfaction from a state of dissatisfaction, and you're trying to learn to tolerate that. And it says without being disturbed in the Bhagavad Gita, but it's also without being discouraged. Because generally when you get disturbed, that's when you do get discouraged. There are times you'll be going through, maybe even in the next 24 hours, when you'll feel discouraged. Something will come up to you, this, that, the next thing, and you think, And that means you're becoming disturbed. So that means you're practicing satisfaction. Like, you look at the spiritual masters, Jananda Raj, he always looks very satisfied, despite so many difficulties that are there. So he's practiced it, and he's now got it down to a fine art that he's always satisfied. But that doesn't come easy. It's not that you take this tablet, a satisfaction tablet, and then everything's fine. It means that you've learned to go through so many situations which are dissatisfying, and you've practiced and practiced, and you've come to the point of being satisfied. It's interesting, Satchit and Ananda, Sat and satisfaction, because when you become aware of the eternality, then you become satisfied, then You see the bigger scheme of things, and then you don't become so disturbed by the tiny things that are going on. So yeah, like Jayananda Prabhu was saying, we resist the temptation to complain. And a person that complains all the time means a person who's very reactive, because the environment has to be just right for them, and if it's not, then they complain, rather than a proactive person is learning to be satisfied with wherever the environment is like. This person does that, it annoys me, but okay, that's fine. That's the way he is. I accept that. Or this situation is like this, or we don't have this much facility for this. Okay, so that's what I've got to work with. Let me be satisfied with that and allow Krishna. Because Krishna can't really come in and help until we accept things. And then Krishna can come in. If we're always dissatisfied and moaning and whining, then it's teaching us a bad lesson that every time we moan, Krishna's going to step in and help us. But we don't see that with Prahlad, right? He's not putting these bits of paper in the royal suggestion box about how Hiranyakashipu could do things better. He's just accepting. He's not complaining. He's preaching, actually. He's taken a very difficult situation as an opportunity to preach. So, Prabhupada says in the purport, from the Vedas we learn that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Person. Okay, why would Prabhupada say that? He says, we learn that the personality of Godhead is the Supreme Person. Why would he say that? Because obviously if he's the personality of Godhead, he must be the Supreme. Sri Ramaj was saying, we're more interested in the personality of Godhead than in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What do you think that means?
Maybe because we want to know, Krishna as a person rather than his opponents.
Yeah.
Because
Aishwarya, yeah. Because in Vaikuntha, everyone knows, everyone's fully aware that Narayana is God, and everyone's been really careful and awe and reverence. But they don't in Goloka, they don't know. They maybe sometimes think that he's a special person, but then they just forget that and stop playing with him. So we learn from the Vedas. So it could be that from the Vedas you've learned about the personality of Godhead, but you've not learned that he's the Supreme Person. So you may just think, oh yeah, Ramachandra, he's a great hero, and Krishna, he's amazing. He has all these palaces and he's so opulent. So we can learn that this personality is the Supreme Personality, Krishna is the Supreme Person. A Brahmin who's well versed in Vedic knowledge and fully conversant with transcendental matters becomes a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore one should worship such a Brahmin or a Vaishnava. So what is that? What is that called? There's Vishnu Tattva, there's Jiva Tattva, and then if a person becomes well versed in Vedic knowledge and fully conversant with transcendental matters, what happens to him? He becomes Guru Tattva. So Guru Tattva is Jiva Tattva under the shelter of either Lord Balaram or under the shelter of Srimati Radharani. And then a Vaishnava is superior to a Brahmin, because whereas a Brahmin knows that he is Brahman, a Vaishnava knows that he is an eternal servant of the Supreme Brahman. So knowing that you're a servant doesn't mean when I ask you, are you a servant of Krishna, and you say yes, that doesn't mean that you know you're a servant of Krishna. So what would be an indication that somebody knows he's a servant of Krishna? He's serving, there's a particular verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 10.8. Do you know the end part? Do you know 10.8 of the seed verses? Worship me with all their hearts, yeah. So if you say you know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the question would be, well, why aren't you serving him with all your heart? Because if you did, you would, If you actually knew that you were part and parcel of him and you were created just for his pleasure and you owe him your entire existence, then you would naturally want to reciprocate with that. But if you're not really aware of that, then you won't really want to do that. So, therefore, the Vaishnava is superior because he knows that he is the servant. Vishnu Chakra Thakur says, Shakshad Dadi Twain Nas Samastra Sastra. So, sometimes when devotees are singing that, they don't sing it the right way, but it's Nas Samastra Sastra. Sastra is the Shastra. Shakshad means directly. Dhari is Hari. Dhari Twain Nas Samastra Sastra. So in all the scriptures, the spiritual master, who is the best of the Brahmins, the best of the Vaishnavas, is considered to be as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what's also important when we sing the Guru Vastika prayers, it says Nikunja, Rati Keli Siddha. Anyone know what that means? Yeah. And what does Kunj mean? If you see Kunj anywhere, what does that mean? I mean, we know it means a kunj, but it also means very confidential. Only the most confidential pastimes take place in the kunj, because the kunj is made so that nobody can see what's going on in the kunj, apart from those who are expert at serving the divine couple. The kunja Rati Keli Siddhai. And then we also sing, when we're singing Tulsi Arti, we're singing again about kunjas and about serving Krishna confidentially. So the spiritual master is very special. Although a Brahmin or a Vaishnava, what's interesting as well is the spiritual master may not be officially a spiritual master. He may be unofficially a spiritual master. He may not have been socially recognized as a spiritual master, but he may be very dear and very confidential. Like I'm reading When Good Fortune Arises, and institutionally, Gaura Govinda Maharaj wasn't recognized as a spiritual master because there was those 11 that were designated by Srila Prabhupada, and they had to push really heavily for a few years before they finally accepted that he was a very special, elevated personality. But he was already unofficially a spiritual master. There were so many devotees that were going to him for shelter. And if you hear him when he's giving class, he's practically, the class is just one verse after another. It just like Prabhupada, it just rolls out one after another, And Shiv Ramraj, whenever he's speaking with his disciples, he'll say, put your hand up who knows this verse. And it's always the same one or two that know the verse, and nobody else, So what I've done now is photographed all the verses he's recently asked us to learn, and in the morning part of my sadhana I go through those verses until they can become familiar. It's just a question of doing it enough, And then that keeps the brain, which is like a muscle, because the tendency is to just not really bother. But it's so important to learn the Shastra. And it becomes very authoritative then when the person speaks, So that's an Uttama. An Uttama Adhikari, he's fully conversant and nobody can defeat him. The Majjhima, his faith can't be wavered, but he's sometimes defeated. And the Kanishta, he doesn't really know why he's doing anything, and he can be easily swayed. Somebody else could come in and say, I've got a guru, and he's a Kanguru, and he says you can just jump around and And you only have to follow 3 of the regs with my kangaroo, and 4 rounds is fine. Oh, okay, well, that sounds good. So the Kanishta thing, because his faith is pliable, he doesn't have sufficient knowledge to say that's actually bogus. How can you put that forward, you know? The actual standard is 64 rounds, and Prabhupada cut it back to 16, but then said chant as well off the beats as much as possible to make up for it, you know. So that's the bare minimum for 16. There was a nice article that came out, Chaitanya Chandra, he says, some devotees can chant 16 rounds with full attention, and that's sufficient for them. He said, but I'm not advanced enough to do that, so therefore I have to chant more rounds. And 16 is not enough for me. If you can get by with 16, great, it means you must be really advanced. I'm not advanced enough to just chant 16. Especially if the 16 are sleepy and all over the place, then you can't really count them as your 16 rounds. So you should try and chant extra rounds. Maybe not on the beats, but throughout the day. Although a Brahmana or Vaishnava is worshipped as being the Supreme Personality of God, such a devotee always remains a faithful servant of the Lord and never tries to enjoy the prestige that might accrue to him from being the Supreme Lord's representative. Does anyone know a story of Srila Prabhupada or any of the spiritual masters where it indicated that the person never tried to enjoy the prestige that might accrue from being the Supreme Lord's representative? It may even be your own Guru Maharaj, you know.
I think I can think one of Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Like Prabhupada would get a lot of things given to him. Like there's an example where he was given like a Rolex watch, you know, a very expensive watch, and you know, naturally most people would think, "Well, look, I've been given this." Prabhupada wore it for like a day or something, and then just give it away to someone else straight away, and just try to engage it. Yeah, we see these things a lot. That's very nice. Example I can think of.
I can think of one as well, but Jan, I know you think it could be your own Guru Maharaj, or it could be sure.
Say that when they went to the Kumbh Mela in I think it was 1977. So there was only a cold shower, but Prabhupada took the cold shower in the morning.
And also, he was in a big Pandal program. There was 50, 60,000 people there, and they were all bowing down. And Prabhupada, he stepped up to leave as they were bowing, and he said to his disciples, "Do you know why they are worshipping me? Because I've given up sex life." So the very qualification for being worshipped, if you become enamored by that, then it means you've again taken up sex life. You've again fallen to sex life by accepting that prestige. And Prabhupada was really clear that the reason why he was getting all that worship was because he wasn't taking the adoration, the name and fame, distinction for himself. That was his qualification. Shri Karunitai Vai Pashashi Ki Jai, Shri Tasinath Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Giridhar Lal Ki Jai, Shri Nrsimha Bhagavan Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. And personally, I could say for Shri Ramraj, I saw him at Vyasa Puja on the farm in Hungary a few years ago, and he was getting a lot of glorification, and he was getting a lot of gifts, but he was accepting it all in a very kind of regal, kind of very dignified way, where you could see he wasn't enamored by it for himself, but he was just seeing that this was all by Prabhupada's mercy, that this was taking place, you know. So that's a transparent via medium, that the all the service is taken in and immediately it's just handed on. And then Srila Prabhupada, he takes it all and he hands it on. And that way it goes back to Krishna. As soon as the person starts to feel like it's for him, then immediately falls down. Any questions or comments? Yes, Ishan. Oh, sorry. Yes, Reynolds.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for thought-provoking about this pratishtha. I'm just wondering how can we recognize this pratishtha coming up? Because I think I can think of examples in my own experience, or maybe something you can share. Because our false ego is so strong that it comes up and it's just covered completely, yeah.
How to see it when you come. See, the whole nature of pratishtha is it's very subtle. Like you could be really humble, and you get a reputation of being humble, and then you become proud about being humble. I'm your most fallen servant, so it's the most. I am the most. Okay, you're fallen, but at least you're the most fallen. So generally what happens is when you're chugging along in your devotional service and putting fuel in your devotional vehicle and chugging along, if you find that the vehicle starts to spurt, then it means that there's some impurity in the fuel, and then you lose your enthusiasm and you lose your confidence to practice devotional service. So you may not be consciously aware that the pratishtha is there, but it will reflect in your enthusiasm to practice Krishna consciousness. So if you find you're feeling less enthusiastic and you're finding yourself very discouraged and very critical in your mind of the situation, the facilities, the devotees, then you can know that there's something gone wrong, So then the next question is, how do you tweak? How do you find tweak all the time for when you are wandering off the path? And that's why many, many places in Srila Prabhupada's books, he talks about being incessantly chanting, because it is practically impossible not to make offenses in one way or another when you're practicing devotional service. There's so many intricacies, and especially in the association of devotees, if you're just chanting and growing a few flowers in a cave up in the Himalayas, you've not really got anyone to offend. Of course, you're not really going to make that much advancement either. But when you're in the association of devotees, there's so many different factors that are at play, So then the only safeguard against this is to fill all the gaps with chanting the holy name. And by doing that, constant chanting, incessant chanting in between, then even if there is some prestige there or some offense has been made, then it will be washed out. It's kind of proactive. It's like having a cup of water, and for definite you're going to be dropping drops of ink into the cup of water. That's an already foregone conclusion. That's just a given. You're going to be doing that. So the only solution is to turn the tap on and keep that in the water all the time. And as those drops of ink go in, they're immediately flushed out. And that constant rush of water is the constant chanting of the holy names, the incessant chanting. We do 16 rounds. That's the bare minimum. But the actual aspiration is Kirtaniya Sadahari. And somebody was asking Srila Prabhupada, how do you manage to chant 16 rounds, Prabhupada? We don't see you, you're so busy and you're doing so much translation work. And Prabhupada asked the devotee to come over, and the devotee was listening. Not sure exactly where it was on Prabhupada's back or on his chest. But when he was listening, he could hear the Maha Mantra. Prabhupada was chanting all the time. So we want to achieve that state where as soon as there's a pause or a gap and we're not speaking, immediately the mantra's there on the tongue, then we know we're starting to come toward the Shuddhanam. And by just chanting those extra rounds in between your japa periods can help safeguard. So that's kind of a proactive strategy that just take it for granted there will be prestige, pratishtha. It will be there. It's just bound to be there, It's like even if you just offer an arati without the ghee lamp falling off the ghee wick falling off the lamp, You're like, we just get proud over the silliest things, And even like you hear the song and you think it's really good and you record it and then you show somebody else it and they listen to it, and because it's you that recorded it, and they're like, oh, that's really good, and you go, yeah, I've got good taste. You didn't even make the song or write the words or arrange the music, but just because you've got a song that somebody else likes, immediately it's British to that. You're in the car and you put the thing on and someone, oh, I really like that. Yeah, it's one of my songs. It's like so ridiculous, So the only way you can safeguard against that inherent stupidity is to just keep chanting all the time and serving enthusiastically and being engaged in the Sankirtan movement. Shiv Ramash was saying, if you're in ISKCON and you haven't got a taste for doing Srila Prabhupada's books, or you've never done Srila Prabhupada's books, he says, then you don't really know what the movement's about. Any other questions, comments? Jayananda.
I don't understand when you say that Srila Prabhupada said that John Lennon got a dog's body in his next life, because Srila Prabhupada was still alive before. Because Prabhupada died in 77, but John Lennon didn't die until 1980. So I don't understand how that one is.
Well, the astrologers can see ahead of time. That's the whole point, isn't it? An astrologer can see. He can tell you the Twin Towers are going to go crashing down before they have. Otherwise, you're not an astrologer, right? Astrologer can tell you what's going to happen. Doesn't tell you what has happened. I suppose that was a question not completely related to this class. That was just like a pet niggle there that's been niggling. Yeah, astrology can see Trikaligya. They can see past, present, and future. Any other questions? More related to this class, if that's possible. We're talking about Pratishta, and Prabhupada's warning about it toward the end. He never tries to enjoy the prestige. Yeah.
Sorry, just on what I asked earlier, how to recognize it. But maybe we can't recognize it as it's happened, but sometimes, like, my personal experience is, if I've ever done a kirtan and then after kirtan I feel quite contaminated, So I feel like this might be, I've had some Pratishta going on in my brain or whatever,
Yeah.
Some like sort of, oh, look, this is going so good.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, like, usually if you do a nice kirtan, you feel great, right? But I feel like, your heart rate's funny and you just feel like not so great,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's one example of how to know that you've done it. And it's not like you can stop it because it's already happened. But.
Well, it's interesting. Srila Prabhupada in the Nectar instruction, he in the purport to Dadati Patiginati, he says the real Dadati principle is that you get the most advanced devotee to lead the kirtan. And what he's doing is he's sharing his taste for the holy name. So everyone in the kirtan, they immediately experience this extra taste that they don't experience when they chant themselves, because the leader is sharing that with them. So the problem is, if the person leading the kirtan has got a very, very good voice and people like that, then he may be getting recognition and appreciation for the wrong thing, and then he becomes really caught up on the technicalities, that it has to be this instrument that I use, and I want to do it this melody, and then I want to go into that melody. Like these DJs, they go into one thing and then they go into something else, and they feel like they're controlling the whole crowd, by what they're doing. But Ayendra Prabhu was saying, the melody, I'm getting asked so often, when do you know when to change the melody, and what's the best melody and all this? How do you know all these things, And he was saying, that's not actually the question. The real question is it Namaparad Kirtan? Is it Namabas Kirtan? Or is it Shuddhanam Pratibimba, I think he calls it. Is it Shuddhanam? So if it's Shuddhanam, then everyone gets purified. The person leading, the person hearing, and the whole atmosphere. And that would be a question of how well the person chants his japa, how well he avoids the 10 offenses to the holy name. Well, now he may have a beautiful voice. He sounds like Elvis Presley, and he gives this amazing kirtan, and all the Matajis are swooning and asking the temple president, is he married? And if he is, do you think the marriage will last? This type of thing going on, you know. So that's got nothing to do with the actual kirtan. But then we're bound to automatically be like that. If that's the level of consciousness that we're at just now, then we can only try to engage that tendency to want to be appreciated for a melodious kirtan, in the hope that we become purified to the point where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would have sometimes singers that weren't very good singers, but were very pure, and they would lead the kirtan. Anyone ever been in a kirtan where someone is leading it and they can't sing, but it's a really ecstatic kirtan? And in another kirtan where the person's singing and he's really, really thinking he's such an amazing singer, and you feel like, I don't really want to go along with this, because if I get into this, he'll get the glorification, and he'll take it that that's because of him, you know. So sometimes it's a work in progress what's taking place in devotional service, and the Ganga itself is pure, but there's a lot of things floating around in the Ganga that's not. It's not the Ganga, it's just things that have come into the Ganga, and they're floating along in the Ganga as well. So the chanting, the kirtan is pure, but there may be some impurities that are floating along there as well.
Thank you for your question, Prabhu. Yes, sometimes we get glorified by someone else. And what I've noticed, the best way to sort of like maybe kind of like
Not be contaminated by it.
Yeah, is to try to glorify others, like when just like, but like genuinely kind of glorify others, kind of see the good things in anyone else, and also have the appreciation for Prabhupada and for Krishna and for devotees. And I think that kind of like
yeah, well, when someone's glorifying you, should take it that this is something you have to live up to, because nothing's static in Krishna consciousness. You know, somebody may come up to you and say, "Wow, you're a fantastic distributor. Somebody gave you £500 the other day. That is so amazing," you know. But all that's doing then is, the only way you can reply to that honestly is say, "Well, thanks for the glorification. I'll try and live up to your words," because they put a certain status on you, that you're the top book distributor, you're the top kirtan, fantastic kirtan Prabhu, fantastic class. So all that's done is it's put an onus on you that the next time you talk, you better make sure it's not a rubbish class, or when you go out in Sankirtan, it's not a terrible day that you have, otherwise you're not going to be living up to it. So you can take it like that. When someone glorifies you, can say, "Thank you very much, I hope I can live up to your glorification, your expectations." And then you're putting yourself back. And that's why Sankirtan is so good, because any prestige you built up from the day before, the next day can just be smashed to smithereens, and you're back to square one. And you can't say, if the person says, "Well, why should I take a buck off you and give you a donation?" And you say, "Well, I'm Maha Big Buck Das. I've won the marathon for 59 years, and I always do the biggest. People give me huge donations." That doesn't mean anything, does it? Whether the person's going to help or not. it's like walking up a mountain, Krishna consciousness. You're climbing up the mountain, and sometimes you can get to a nice ledge, and you look out, and you think, "Wow, this is a beautiful view." And you look how much more you still got to go on the mountain, and you say, "Do you know what? I'm actually okay here. This is a nice view. I've got my little lunch pack. I'm just going to settle down here. This will do for me." But you can't do that in Krishna. There's no point where you can settle down and say, "Okay, I've written a few books. I've led a few Faro Kirtans. I've had a few great days on Sankirtan. That's it now. I'm okay. Just let me chill out here on this ledge on the mountain." You're going to get to the top of the mountain. So you have to keep pushing all the time until you get there. There's no breaks. Srila Prabhupada said the only time you can relax is when you're in Krishna's arms. And there's the story of the Pandavas going up the mountain in the Himalayas at the end of the pastimes, and they fall down. They all fall away and die. Draupadi first, and different ones. And there's a dog following Yudhisthira, and then eventually the ground turns into Chintamani, and then he's back in the spiritual world. So it's like that. You just keep climbing and climbing, and one day the ground will turn into Chintamani. Any other questions or comments? Any niggles? Utsahanaschatarya tata kama pravadana sangachaka chatavraya shabdaya bhakta prasidjati. Proceed is to proceed, prasidjati. So being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, following back to principles of Shravana, Kirtan, Vishnu, Smaranam, abandoning the association of worldly-minded persons and following the footsteps of the great devotees. These 6 principles will undoubtedly assure complete success in devotional service. So anything that impedes your enthusiasm or your confidence, that's not favorable. So if that does happen, then you know you've done something wrong somewhere, that needs to be rectified. And the process itself is purifying. So it's not that if you're in the shower and you suddenly discover a big lump of dirt under your armpit that you hadn't noticed, that means that the showering process has to be abandoned now. You jump out the shower and say, "Look, I'm totally filthy here. I didn't even realize I was so filthy." You stay in the shower and you just turn the shower on more. You just follow the process more. Or you realize you've not really been showering properly. You've not really been applying the process properly. So then you apply the process properly. At the end of Shrita Bhakti Chintamani, Shiva Ramos does this fictitious story. And it's about a brahmachari that was starting to struggle a little bit in the ashram. And he was thinking maybe it's time he should get married and settle down. And his temple commander, or maybe it was sannyasi, says to him, just rededicate yourself to the morning program, to your reading, to your chanting, and you'll find that you'll just be able to rebut it. And that's what he did, and that's what happened. He broke through and he got strong again, and then he was able to just leave it behind. So quite a lot of the time in Krishna consciousness, it's reapplying the principles that we've unbeknownly slackened on without even realizing it. And then everything's okay again, ISKCON Guru Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Shishikona Tamaya Pachasha Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Bol. And all of you, Ki Jai.